500 years. That's how long it's been since this land was first claimed, conquered, and carved into what we now call the United States of America. But when you look closer, when you peel back the flags, the parades, and the patriotic songs, you'll see something else. A story written not just in triumph, but in tragedy, in blood, in fear, in decisions that changed the course of humanity. Because the history of America isn't just a story of freedom. It's also a reminder of how fragile civilization truly is. So today, you're not just looking at history. You're walking through the shadows of it. This is 500 years of history of the United States, dark moments that shaped a nation.
It begins with exploration, the so-called Age of Discovery. European powers, driven by greed and ambition, set sail to find new worlds. And when they landed here, in the Americas, they called it discovery. But you can't discover a place already filled with people. Before a single flag was planted, this continent was home to over 10 million indigenous people, nations with their own languages, art, traditions, and civilizations. What came next was one of the darkest transformations in human history. Disease, displacement, destruction, entire cultures, like the Powhatan Confederacy, the Wampanoag, and countless others, were wiped out by war, famine, and foreign illness. What was called progress was really survival for those who remained. This was the first lesson in the fragility of civilization, how quickly it can be erased by greed and fear. You can't tell America's story without facing this truth. The country was built on slavery. For over 250 years, millions of Africans were taken from their homes, chained, beaten, sold, and forced to work. From cotton fields to sugar plantations, they built the wealth that fueled an empire. They were treated as property, not people. But in their suffering, they built something stronger than any nation. They built endurance, faith, and a legacy of resistance. The cries of the enslaved still echo in every corner of American history. From Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad, to Frederick Douglass's speeches, to the slow, painful path toward freedom. And yet the shadow of that past never fully disappeared. Because even when the chains were broken, prejudice, segregation, and injustice took new forms. Civilization again proved fragile, and progress never free. The American Revolution, a war for independence, a promise of liberty for all men. But who was all? While patriots fought for freedom from British rule, enslaved Africans and Native Americans were denied that very freedom. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal," while owning more than 600 slaves. That contradiction is the heartbeat of America, noble ideals wrapped in painful hypocrisy. The Revolution created a nation of incredible potential, but it also planted the seeds of division that would one day tear it apart. In the 1830s, the U.S. government signed the Indian Removal Act. The goal: move indigenous tribes from their lands to make way for white settlers. Over 60,000 men, women, and children from tribes like the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole were forced to march west, through cold, hunger, and disease. It became known as the Trail of Tears. Thousands died along the way. Families were torn apart. And the land they walked, once home, became a graveyard. To the people giving the orders, it was policy. To those who lived it, it was apocalypse. Civilization showed its darkest face that day, when progress meant erasing those who stood in the way. Then came the war that split America in two, the North and the South, divided over slavery, power, and what it truly meant to be free. Over 600,000 Americans died, more than any other war the country has ever fought. Cities burned, families shattered, and the nation nearly destroyed itself. When Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he didn't just free the enslaved, he redefined America's soul. But freedom came at a price, and not everyone was ready to pay it. The Civil War ended on paper, but its wounds still bleed through centuries of racism, division, and distrust. That's the thing about civilization. It can survive war, but not silence. After the war, the country tried to rebuild, but freedom came with new chains, laws, intimidation, and terror. The Ku Klux Klan rose from the ashes of defeat, spreading fear, violence, and white supremacy. Lynching became a tool of control. Thousands of innocent Black Americans were murdered, not for crimes, but for being symbols of change. It was a new kind of war, not fought with armies, but with hate, silence, and systemic injustice. And through it all, brave men and women kept pushing forward, proving that the soul of a nation doesn't die with its mistakes. It grows by confronting them. America entered a new age: steel, oil, and ambition. The Industrial Revolution turned cities into giants. But while some got rich, millions lived in poverty. Children worked in factories. Workers labored 12 hours a day in unsafe conditions. Immigrants flooded in chasing the American dream, and many never found it. We call it progress. But for most, it was survival. The story of civilization isn't just about what we build. It's about who gets left behind when we build it. The 20th century tested America like never before. World War I pulled the nation onto the global stage. World War II redefined it as a superpower. But between those wars came the Great Depression, a decade of hunger, joblessness, and despair. And even as soldiers fought tyranny abroad, racism and inequality still raged at home. Japanese Americans were imprisoned in internment camps. Black soldiers fought for freedom in Europe and returned to segregation in their own country. Victory abroad meant little if injustice still lived within. And that's what makes this story so haunting. You can win the war and still lose your way. The mid-20th century brought a new revolution, not fought with guns, but with voices. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, and John Lewis stood against a system built to keep them silent. They faced fire hoses, prisons, and bullets, but they never stopped marching. The civil rights movement wasn't just about race. It was about identity, equality, and the right to exist with dignity. But every victory, from Brown versus Board of Education to the Civil Rights Act, came with sacrifice. MLK was assassinated in 1968, his dream, cut short but never silenced. That's the fragility of civilization. It takes centuries to build progress and seconds to destroy it. After World War II came a new kind of terror, not fought on battlefields but in minds. The Cold War turned fear into policy. America and the Soviet Union stood on the edge of nuclear destruction, a standoff that lasted decades. School children practiced duck and cover drills. Citizens built bomb shelters in their backyards. One button, one mistake, and civilization itself could have ended. But maybe the scariest part wasn't the weapons. It was how normal it all became. Fear had become part of everyday life, a quiet reminder that progress and destruction are always side by side. And now, here we are, the 21st century, a time of innovation, connection, and unimaginable power, but also division, misinformation, and fear. From September 11th to economic crises, from endless wars to political polarization, from racial unrest to digital chaos, the last few decades have shown us something vital. Civilization isn't indestructible. It's delicate, emotional, human. Technology connects us and isolates us. We have more knowledge than ever, but less understanding than before. The story of America continues, but it's not finished. Because every generation must decide what kind of civilization they want to leave behind. So now it's your turn. You've seen 500 years of history, the courage, the cruelty, the brilliance, and the mistakes. The truth is simple. Civilization isn't measured by how powerful we become, but by how we treat each other when power tempts us to forget compassion. The dark moments in history aren't just memories. They're warnings. Because the same fears, greed, and anger that destroyed the past still live among us. So the question is, what will you do with that knowledge? You can look away, or you can remember, learn, question, build something better. Because the fragility of civilization isn't a weakness. It's a reminder that what we protect with truth, empathy, and courage can last forever. This has been 500 years of history of the United States. Not just the story of a nation, but a mirror for humanity itself.